Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Natasha and welcome to another episode of Chai Chats where I virtually interview really cool Pakistanis all over the world and we dive deep into one specific topic. Today I'm very excited to have Maria Kari on our show. Assalamualaikum Maria. How are you doing?
Walaikum assalam.
I normally, when I do intros, I talk a bit about, educational background or work background, but I just need to fangirl Maria a little bit because she is doing incredible things. Her background is in immigration law, but recently, since the war in Gaza, she has actually been involved in litigation against the United States government and actively helping families, American Palestinian families stuck in Palestine, come back to America. I believe you've helped 70 families up until now, correct?
That's right. Our team has helped evacuate and repatriate 70 Palestinian Americans, and we continue to work with a lot of families still in Gaza.
That's incredible. And while I'm sure we could talk about that for a very long time, our topic for today is different. And it's a case that's very close to my heart. And it's the Aafia Siddiqui case. And Maria is part of the legal team that is almost like revisiting that case or reviving that case. Maybe that's not the right term. But before we get into what's happening now, I want to take us back a little bit to the very beginning so we can kind of recenter on this case. What are the facts? What is some historical context? And I would love to hear that from you, Maria.
Yeah, so Aafia's case is one that I think is close to every Pakistani's heart, especially in the generation that we grew up in. We always sort of had an idea, an inkling of the injustice that Aafia suffered. But the problem with Aafia's story is that it's kind of cloaked in so much conspiracy and misinformation. Some of it is deliberate and some of it is just a result of, decades long of somebody being in prison under very shady, secretive circumstances. So what we're working on now is, like you said, reviving the Aafia movement, the Free Aafia movement, which has never gone away, but definitely has lost steam over the years. I think it's in full swing now. And I've actually just come back from meeting Aafia herself. And I'll be going back to Dallas, Fort Worth, where she is serving her life sentence at FMC Carswell. I'll be going back there in a couple of weeks to see her again.
That's, I get goosebumps every time I think about her and this case. Why don't we go back to the beginning? Why was she taken into custody? What are the charges against her? What does media say? And after all of your research, what actually happened from the facts that you've uncovered?
Yeah. So what I can share with you guys is, it's a lot, actually, because we've uncovered quite a bit in the last few months of work. And Aafia is a remarkable woman. She's a mother to 3 children who were actually with her at the time of her abduction in Karachi. And the story has to start before that abduction, though, right? So Aafia was at the University of Houston, where she then transferred to MIT, where she did her undergrad. She then went to Brandeis University to do her PhD in neuroscience, and I actually had a chance to talk to her about her PhD, and she just comes alive when she talks about her education. And her focus had been on children's education and how to learn through imitation. And what took her to Pakistan was this PhD. She had traveled there with her children to meet with officials in Islamabad to talk about how they could implement the research she had done into Pakistan's curriculum to make her education system better. And this is actually just something I talked to her at great length about in my most recent visit with her. And it's fascinating to see this woman who was at the peak of her game then. The stuff that she was talking about sent chills down my spine, because it would have been so incredible to have had become part of Pakistan's curriculum. But unfortunately, she never made it to that meeting in Islamabad to discuss her goals. She was part of the sort of Musharraf US-led efforts where the US paid these bounty ransoms to the Musharraf government, something Musharraf himself openly bragged about in his book, In Line of Fire. And she was, paid a ransom for. She was abducted by a bunch of men who also took her children who were with her at the time. So you have 6-year-old Ahmed, 3-year-old Mariam, and 6-month-old Suleiman.
Oh my God.
She from her abduction in the streets of Karachi, she was then renditioned, which is a fancy legal term for saying kidnapped and taken out of the country to Bagram prison in Afghanistan. And here's where I sort of my life kind of connects with Aafia's story, is because I worked on the Bagram prisoners cases back in law school like a decade ago, and then a decade later now my co-counsel and I are back to working on this horrible black site, the CIA black site of prisons where a lot of Muslim men primarily, and at least one woman, Aafia, were subjected to just unspeakable horror and torture. So Aafia then is disappeared for 5 years. Those 5 years she spends in Bagram, not knowing if her children are dead and alive. And the horrors that she faced, that so many people face in Bagram, were the textbook kind of war on terror, war crimes and atrocities that we saw at that time. Everything from forced starvation, waterboarding, sexual assault, torture, all of that.
Is she charged with anything at that point, or they just grab her?
Her and so many others who were in these CIA black sites were taken and detained and held for years and years without any charges. Aafia was never charged with anything related to terrorism. To this day, Aafia has not been charged with or found guilty of anything in connection to terrorism. And I think that's critical to stress here, because that's her 5 years there, while her sister back in Pakistan, Fawzia, who is an incredible woman in her own right, dedicates her entire life looking for her sister and her nieces and nephews. She manages, after a few years, to track down Ahmed, who was 6 years old at the time of the abduction. He turns up in Afghani prison. His name has been changed, and he's told not to ever say who he was. But when he talks to his khala, Fawzia, on the phone, he calls her Adda, which for Fawzia is better than any DNA testing. They did do DNA testing after to confirm it was him, but Adda was a made-up name that he called only Fawzia, his khala. So for her, that's confirmed that, that's her nephew, and that gives her the hope she had held on to, but which was starting to burn out. It gives her the hope that the other children might be alive and that her sister Aafia might be okay. So a year after Ahmed turns up in an Afghani jail, you have Fawzia get a meeting with Hamid Karzai, who was then the president of Afghanistan. And through his assistance, you have Mariam, who had been 3 at the time of the abduction, turn up on the streets outside Fawzia's house in Karachi. And she's wearing a necklace around her neck that identifies her. And she only speaks English. She doesn't speak Urdu, and her name has been changed to Fatima, I believe. And she had spent the previous 5 years adopted by an American Christian white family who had been living in Afghanistan. So Mariam has some memories of being flown around on military jets. So we imagine, and we haven't been able to track this family down that adopted her, but we imagine she was part of like an embassy family or something who had been stationed in Afghanistan at the time. Suleiman, unfortunately, has never turned up. He was 6 months old at the time of the abduction, and the older brother remembers and recalls that Suleiman fell down and hit the ground, and there was blood. But I mean, this is a 6-year-old's memories. But a part of me kind of wonders if they were able to look at the 2 children. Did Suleiman was given up to some orphanage or adopted out, similar to Mariam? But what happens to Aafia after those 5 years in Bagram is even more incredible than the fact that she has just spent 5 years without charges. So after 5 years, they realize that they have somebody who's of no value to them. There's nothing to charge her with. She knows nothing. She is innocent. But the problem is there's an entire movement in her name. People are galvanized. They're up in arms over the fact that, the daughter of Pakistan has been taken. So she's a problem for not just the US now, but the Pakistani powers that be. Certain individuals, this house of cards is going to come crashing down on them. You realize that you've now just been holding this woman and raping her and torturing her for 5 years. And her children have been separated from her, who are Americans. So they do what they think is a smart thing to do in this situation, which is basically attempt to assassinate her. They send her to Ghazni province with a young boy. They tell her, this is your son. Go to the US embassy in Ghazni province. There you will meet Mariam, your daughter, and then you can go on your way to Pakistan. And she tells them, well, what am I going to say? Like, where was I for these last 5 years? They say, just say you were wandering around in Pakistan. And she says, but I know nothing about what has been happening in the world at this time. And they give her some magazines to read to catch up in the last 5 years. She travels to Pakistan. And again, we have certain images. We have witnesses that can speak to all of this. And she travels to Ghazni province. And when she gets there, outside the U.S. embassy, and we have it on, good information and belief that somebody called in a suicide bomb tip saying that she was a suicide bomber, her and the child with her. And she's surrounded by the Afghan National Police. And the only thing that stopped her from being killed right then and there on the spot was, Allah sends angels in different different disguises, this tailor who happened to speak Urdu and got in the way and stopped her from being killed. And we found him, we've spoken to him. He remembers this episode well. He can corroborate this whole story 20 years later. And she was taken into custody. Here's where things get ridiculous. So if you pull up what was told to the court in the Southern District of New York during Aafia's trial, it's a complete mess and makes zero sense. I mean, Aafia, they were not the defense. Aafia's legal team was never allowed to talk about what had happened to her in the preceding 5 years, and Aafia was not allowed to put on any of her own witnesses on the stand. So the only narrative you get now, the only narrative that comes from the court hearing that the media then picks up is the prosecution's narrative, which is that Aafia is this crazed, America-hating terrorist sympathizer, married to a terrorist woman who saw an American official enter the room, saw a gun sitting there unarmed, grabbed the gun, this M4 that she has no clue how to work, managed to disengage it, and then shot at American officials. How is it then that the only person to come out of this episode was Aafia, the person who almost died with 2 gunshot wounds to the abdomen? Right. So the case is a travesty on so many levels. We have all the evidence in the world that sort of disputes every step of the facts as I've laid them out for you right now. But unfortunately, Aafia was convicted for attempting to murder federal officers, and those charges were then bumped up to terrorism charges. And that's how we find Aafia now serving an 86-year life sentence in FMC Carswell, which is here in Fort Worth, Texas, so about 4 hours from me. And it's a women's only prison for women with medical needs. So you think that it would be a place where a person with, a certain profile would be protected and taken care of, because you have some of the world's most vulnerable women housed in this prison. But unfortunately, what's happened to Aafia at FMC Carswell is a whole other issue that has only made her situation even more desperate and horrifying.
This case has been going on for a long time. So what is the push behind kind of reviving it? When did that start and why?
Yeah, so Clive Stafford Smith is this brilliant attorney. He is my co-counsel in this case, and his life's work has been exonerating and defending the people who are the most defenseless. He's kind of the guy that wedges himself in between to protect a person who is being who's having their rights curtailed by a government. So his work has led him to Guantanamo. He's helped, I think, 80 plus prisoners at Guantanamo find relief. And same with Bagram. His work has also gotten, about 300 people off of death row here in the United States. So, I mean, this is his bread and butter. Where I sort of come in is, like you mentioned at the top of the interview, I'm an immigration attorney, but where I come in is working to make Aafia's life much more comfortable while we pursue the compassionate release part of the case. So, Clive is working on getting Aafia home back to Pakistan, which is where she belongs. She's, she's a deeply traumatized, tortured person who should not be in jail, who should never have seen the inside of a jail cell. Yet here we are 20-something years later. And the right thing now is for the state of Pakistan to step up to the plate, to call for her repatriation back to Pakistan. And there's ways that can happen, especially in an election year, which is why we've kind of gotten the momentum we have right now with Biden potentially renewing his administration or exiting. Either way, the time is right for us to either call for a pardon of Aafia, or compassionate release, or doing a prisoner swap, which is another option that's being explored. And then on my end, my team and I, what we're doing right now is, litigation against the prison, looking at what this federal prison is doing to this woman. And when I say what they're doing to this woman, whatever you can think of in terms of the rights that can be violated by a person who has been locked away and can't scream for help because they're completely forgotten. Those violations are happening to not just Aafia, but women at FMC Carswell. So, over a dozen prison guards at FMC Carswell have been convicted of raping and sexually assaulting inmates, including a chaplain. So you can imagine the horrific sexual assault that Aafia has endured at the hands of FMC Carswell prison officials. And this is a staff that's supposed to be there to protect her. Yet she is receiving medical treatment from the same people who are torturing and abusing her. It just blows my mind. Every single day that she's in there is a day too long. And along with some of the sexual assault and physical assault that she's experienced, is the fact that she doesn't have some of her basic constitutional rights. So as a prisoner, you have the right to have access to a religious leader, so you can meet with a chaplain, like a priest, and that also translates to being able to meet with an imam. So we have a couple of imams here in Dallas, some high-profile imams who have been, willing pro bono to meet with Aafia, and the prison has not allowed it. So there's just so many different things that are happening that I'm currently working on to basically prevent from happening, so that Aafia's time can be a lot more easier, because she's facing very difficult circumstances currently in prison.
The work you're doing is so incredible, so meaningful. Before we wrap up, how can people watching help? How can they continue to follow along in the case? How can people get involved?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So everybody and anybody can join in the Free Aafia movement to help. A lot of it is going to come down to the country of Pakistan, which is where Aafia is from. She is a citizen of Pakistan. She is not an American. She's never been an American. She was always a student here in the US. Her children are American, but the country that she belongs to is Pakistan. So the pressure and the consideration for her well-being needs to come from Pakistan. So one of the main things that we as Pakistanis, both in the US and in Pakistan, can do is to call on our government to step up for what's right and demand that this woman be released and repatriated back home. And for that, use whatever means people have, whether it be your social media platforms, whether it be your ability to write, whether it be what you're doing, whether it be putting in calls to the right people with the right connection. That's one thing. And then, we also have a Free Aafia legal fund. All of the work that my team does is pro bono. We do not get paid, but there's a lot of other costs involved with legal work. So that's something I can share with you. And, we're also looking for volunteer law students and attorneys, because this case is massive. It's got a lot of moving pieces. So if there's attorneys or law students in the US who have an interest in being a part of our efforts, please contact me. I will provide my work.
Thank you, and thank you for spending the time. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.